You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Bringing you the news and views and the untold side of the Palestinian struggle for freedom from a Palestinian perspective. Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. Unchecked, unfettered genocide, Lebanon, Palestine, West Bank, Jerusalem, 48, everywhere's on fire. The world continues not to care, to turn a blind eye. Our government fails in its obligations to do everything within its power to stop a genocide. One wonders where to look and what is to happen with humanity whilst we allow this to go on. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you want to know what you would have been doing during the Holocaust, you're doing it right now. How this is not impacting everyone as markedly as it's impacting my family, myself, my friends, our supporters, each and every one of you beggars belief. This morning we're joined by a Palestinian-Australian activist and educator, Maxi. Maxi's a Palestinian. She's going to tell us a little bit about her journey. But first, Maxi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Nasser.
Maxi, tell us a little bit about your Nakba story.
Well, I was born here, but my parents both hail from Palestine. It's interesting because I've actually been back there this summer past and, starting to dig deeper about why some families stayed and why some family went. And we all have different ways of coping. But what was really interesting, a lot of the time back in certain generations, it was really hard if, a woman had lost her husband to illness. She actually didn't have the finances or the guts to pick up and leave to another country. So that's how some of my family actually stayed in 48. But my dad's side in Jaffa, they were told to leave their homes when the so-called war broke out, and they did for a couple of weeks. And when they returned, to find people in them that was in them. And they tried to talk. It was, I don't think they actually got far. They said, can we at least have our personal effects? And they said, no, we've thrown and destroyed them out completely. My mother's side was a little bit different. So she comes up from the north in Haifa and a place called Fasuta. And I think her story was it was a 2 a.m. moment when the air raids went off and they walked to the Lebanese border by foot, crossed over into Lebanon. And that was their journey. So a temporary refugee until they got Lebanese citizenship and then came to Australia. There was a loss. There's so much loss of home. My father's home is still there in Jaffa. And each time I go back, I can't help but go down that street and look at it, of course. And it's hard. You don't really understand. I think this second round of Holocaust, it's a real Holocaust now. But you actually start to understand, especially at this age, the extent and the immensity of your parents' trauma and how it just carries through generations. And this has kind of inflamed it again for a lot of us. And we all have different ways of dealing with it, but it's quite fierce, and we're entering quite a sinister time in human history.
That's a mild way to put it, sinister time in human history. So your dad's house in 48, your grandparents, I assume, went back, tried to get their personal effects. No, you can't. Is your dad a 48er? Has he got citizenship?
No, they went to try to escape to Egypt first, and then the boat sank. So they went back, and then they regrouped and headed over into Lebanon, where he then lived most of his life, actually, in Beirut.
And then they came to Australia, and you were born here?
I was born here, yeah.
So they met in Lebanon?
No, they met here through family, friends, and word of mouth. You know how it is.
The marriage drums, the beautiful marriage drums. Yeah. So you grew up in Victoria, New South Wales?
In Sydney.
Much extended family?
No, most extended family are all overseas. So I just have a small amount of cousins here in Sydney that live very far, and then one relative, close relative in Melbourne. But most of my extended family are all in the Northern Hemisphere, scattered.
And it's such a story of diaspora of the Palestinian life, that second and third generation. I can take my children and show them the school I went to and, lie about my magnificent sporting achievements at different footy fields. But we were denied that of our parents. And we were also denied the opportunity to be connected to, in proximity, physically as well, to family. That the cousin experience that most people, quote unquote, get.
It's actually interesting that you brought that up, because the expression of extended family and cousins I was actually talking to, it's coming up a lot for me because it's such a healthy way of moving through life. It's not just one cousin or two cousin. It's like families of 5 kids that have 5 kids, and you've always got people around. You've got aunts and uncles, elders, you've got kids of all different ages, you've got peers, you've got mentors, got long tables. It's every time you gather, there's a festive kind of feeling. It's actually impossible to feel alone and isolated in extended families. It's quite a healthy, I find it's a very healthy expression of community. And that's one thing I think actually is one of my bugbears, that I'm so far away from my extended family, because I have so much fun when I'm with them. There's so many different personalities amongst you. It's, there's from kids to adults, and there's so much learning in that space, and so much love, all kinds of different love as well. And, I feel like in this imperial beast, that this imperial kind of system, and I've always had problems with the nuclear unit because I actually think it doesn't work. I feel extended communities and families are the best thing. And it feels like it's a war on that. When you break really happy families down, it's the same as disconnecting them from their land, their culture, their heritage, everything. But the family, breaking us up and fragmenting and atomizing us, is such an act of hyperviolence.
Well, it's to commodify us, when they disconnect us from, well, firstly, culture, land, history, and then from family, we're stuck in that conveyor belt of delivering return on investment. Maxi, tell us about your activist journey. How did you get to where you are now?
I feel like it's just almost through being Palestinian. There's no way around it. I didn't go out to choose to be an activist. And I feel on some level, being Palestinian, it is part of the parcel. It is such an act of resistance to be born. It's also, I see it as it's a bit of a spiritual quest on some level, to have to actually move through life and be this embodiment of truth and calling out a lot of people when they're not in integrity, and having to walk it still is a lonely path. It's a very solitary path, even though we do have our community. Sometimes you're the lone wolf who actually has to say it. It's been mainly through teaching. I think October 2023 happened, and just to see the divides in schools, in public schools here, was very heartbreaking. I've worked with kids for over 20 years, and they are an immense priority in terms of our social capital for me. And to watch a lot of kids just be ignored and silenced and censored, and you could actually feel them pull back and disappear. And so for me, that actually doesn't create good societies. It doesn't create what the government likes to call social cohesive communities. It's actually the opposite. And I think nothing radicalizes young people more than just leaving them to fall by the wayside, leaving them to their own devices. And I think this has really been the turning point for me. And you get to a certain age as well. Like I've always liked the truth, no matter who it annoys. Now it doesn't matter anymore if we're not being truthful and being integral. Honestly, it's such a joke of an existence. Sorry, I sound quite caustic about that, but you start having to ask, how trivial are most people's lives? What are you really living for? What are we doing here? So I think it's not just the teaching, but it comes from a deeply existential place as well, which I think is intrinsic to being Palestinian.
Well, it is intrinsic, and surely we should be living a values-based life of contribution, of fulfillment, of, giving and feeling. And I said to somebody, we might not see Palestine free. We might not, but I think we will. We will certainly seeing the end of Zionism and the end and the death of this Zionist entity, but we might not see it free. But that journey amongst the community that has sprung up post-October, and those people that you'll work for the liberation with will fulfill your life far more than the pursuit of whatever Harvey has got on sale this weekend. There's so much more important things, and where we were disconnected from opportunity to be connected to our family, we've embraced a whole new community, and that community's embraced us. I was interested when you're talking about the kids pulling back. I've been amazed by the intersectionality and the growth of communities that have embraced us post-October. Kids pulling back, is that just quote unquote brown kids?
It's definitely kids from our diaspora, Levantine students. Yeah, and sometimes they can tell, because I might actually wear a nondescript kafaya to work and get away with it. They'll ask me if, are you Palestinian? And we'll talk about it. And it's the floodgates open. They're itching to talk about it because they can't. There's a general consensus that they're feeling collectively gaslit by the system, by the government, by their teachers and everyone. And teachers, we're in charge of the intellectual development of our children. We're trying to set them up to be great thinkers, to not just look at one thing, and blanketing a whole topic and ignoring a Holocaust, really. It's not even playing tricks. It actually insults their intelligence and makes the whole education department look like a damn fool, because we're not actually saying that we think that we have the capacity to teach that, nor do the students have the capacity to understand what's going on. And kids always understand. They're going home at the end of the day and seeing everything on their phones. They may be talking about it with family and parents. And yes, that community exists, but it's also that's also leaving it in a very one-sided community. We're not teaching them how to discuss it. I mean, if they really want to both sides it, we need to be able to have these discussions and open our conscious framework to be able to hold many ideas and many different opinions and perspectives, which is, I mean, for me as a Palestinian, that's actually what we do. We have a really strong history of profound intellectualism, which has been dominated by our agrarian abilities. Everyone's an agrarian. We are all natural green thumbs, but we also have a huge history of and profound respect for intellectual interchanges and for the teaching profession as a practice and a field in itself. So it's an abomination in some respects. So I'm at this point where I don't feel like I'm actually teaching anymore. It's babysitting within the New South Wales department system. There's a level of disengagement, intellectual and psychosocial disengagement with the kids.
And it's harming our society, as you said, when we talk about children as social capital, about what the potential might be. And there might have been a time, and surely there was, where there was a disconnect, where a radio dispatch or a wire telegram meant that news was 1 week, 1 month, 1 year old. This is digital and live streamed. I mean, the kids are not waiting to get home to see it. It's, as soon as they're disengaged with their teacher, you only have to walk into a restaurant and see a family out for pizza and see that everybody's on their devices, and where they might be is reflective of their own brain. Maxi, you've just come back from Palestine. So you said the summer, was it our summer or Palestine summer?
Their summer. So our winter. I was over there for, July, August.
Tell us a little bit about that trip.
You always go back to, there's always a wedding or two going on. But this time I actually went to an international human rights organization called Al-Haq, which, mind you, Israel has actually designated and put on the terrorist list. That's what they do with a lot of NGOs and people who are actually working in human rights and international law. They brand them terrorists. I love that word. And I had 2 weeks with them, and this probably was one of the most life-changing experiences that I've had. We spent a couple of days going through all their history of documentation, what they do, what they stand for, international human rights law from a Palestinian perspective. And then it was field trips every other day to different places in the West Bank and then in 48 just to hear the stories from people on the ground, the historians, the archivists, people who are actually living the brutality of everyday occupation and land theft and resource theft and the demolition, and I just remember thinking, everywhere you go, it's just rubble heaps and bombed out things. And that's actually Israel's aesthetic. It made me think quite a lot of, a lot of the images people keep sharing about Palestine are those bombed out places. And that's actually not Palestine. Palestinians, when you know them, they get to work very quickly. We're builders. We make beautiful homes, beautiful gardens, beautiful fields. That's what we do, and they keep getting destroyed. I mean, even if you just take a trip through the town of Silwan in Jerusalem, people own their land, they own their home, they've got the deeds, and they come and get destroyed because they might actually put a little extension on. It takes anywhere from 2 to 20 years to get approved for a building permit. So Palestinians just build anyway. And the Israeli state will come and demolish it and leave it in a heap of rubble. And then if you try to clean up your rubble, you'll get a fine as well. So everything that you do, it's just, whether it's administration, whether it's construction, whether it's land, there's always someone there to block you, to diminish you, and to make sure that you live like a pauper on your own land, very dispossessed, even though you still own the title deeds.
Because the Palestinian fight isn't just the Palestinians' fight, it's all our fight, because it's a fight not just about land, it's about a fight for freedom.
Everybody should be standing here today saying, "Free Palestine."
Solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters on behalf of the Gumbaña Nation, my people who've never ceded their sovereignty.
We should be recognising Palestine as a state and recognising the rights of Palestinians.
3CR, stay tuned, stay radical.
Stay locked to 3CR.
Al-Haq is just an amazing organisation, the first Palestinian human rights organisation, NGO, been around for almost 50 years. Was this a program that you signed on to, or did you just volunteer?
No, they run a program. Obviously, hopefully they'll run it next year. I highly recommend people to apply for it. It's an international summer school program for 2 weeks. So just keep a lookout. So maybe sign up on their newsletter and see that the call out possibly around May next year.
Al-Haq. alhaq.org. And skills that you've got an education background, are they looking for lawyers, educators, witnesses?
It's been mainly people working in NGO space and international law, but I think because I came across as an educator and creative practitioner, they wanted to start opening up to see, how different people think and what different people do, people working in different fields, how they're going to operate in this, because we actually need to start spreading our own tentacles as well and cross-discipline, cross-field work now. It's really important. And that's part of the growing community, the global solidarity at the moment, is we need to get out of our silos and start to understand what our capacities are and from where we can dig and start dismantling. So yeah, they're opening it up to different fields now.
The election of Donald Trump, as the world slides towards fascism, what we need to understand is that we need to be building from the ground up. The solution for Palestine has never been in the White House, but it's in the streets. Let's talk a little bit about your art practice. How do you use art to resist?
I think up until October, such a turning point, it was I actually had this conversation about work that I made and was making. My worldview has shifted so remarkably that work that I was making back then in that framework doesn't resonate anymore. And since October, my work is moving more into decoloniality as a social practice. It's working with people, with First Nations, with Indigenous, with diaspora, and how we gather. This is, I think there needs to be ritual around how we come together, what we do, how we appoint elders. We really need to bring our elders back in every conversation because they've lived through so much. They are the wisdom keepers. And so it's taking that focus at the moment, where it used to be drawings of trees, because we can see them there, because we love our trees so much, and film and dance. But right now, there's the want to dance is not the same expression now. The will to dance is to actually put my foot down really hard. There's something else brewing. Everything is changing. I'm really interested in, like you said, grassroots will save us. It's the global solidarity growing on the ground. That will be the only thing. People are the solution. When we start to work together, that's when we can really shift the fabric of reality and overcome. So perhaps my background in performance and theatre and dance and working with chorus, I'd like to probably work in that realm at the moment and create some kind of performance that parallels what's happening in the streets or on the streets and in community. But yeah, it's all changed. It's very much about a decolonial focus. And I always keep asking people what's collective liberation? Because a lot of people just want ceasefire and a two-state solution. And I don't think that's been talking about this for 76 years. It's just a talking point. So I feel like it is about decolonizing this whole colonial beast. It's dispossessing every human of a dignified life. I mean, I can't go too far into it, otherwise I'll probably give myself an aneurysm at the moment. But I think we need to start changing language around these kind of things and start aiming towards collective liberation, knowing that one person or one group of people's liberation is definitely interconnected in everybody else's. You can't liberate one without liberating us all. And that we move towards decolonization as a genuine practice, not just another fandangled word that we slap on to certain processes.
I'd be interested in your take, but we've got a lot of, and they're very welcome, October 8 activists, October 8 Palestinians. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. Everybody's on a different journey. And for some of us, October 7 was like October 6 for us, like October 5. We've never not known this feeling of dread, a feeling of guilt over happiness, a feeling of sadness at comfort. There is no respite to just be able to enjoy, because depending on which family member you connected with most recently as to their own personal experience and what's actually happened. What's your community within Sydney? Have you been surprised by the growth of, understanding of, embracing of?
There's always going to be pockets and groups. God, it's actually, I feel like, I mean, you're in Naarm, which when I visited and connect with people from there, it feels a lot stronger. I mean, you have to look at different city hubs and their different cultural focus. Sydney's always been a harbour city. It's money. It's focused on work and play and mortgage. It doesn't really, have enough. It doesn't allow the time for people to do this. And I always feel people down in Naarm are a lot more passionate, and there's more of that community feel. But that's also, I have a love-hate relationship with my home city. I mean, there's groups, there's pockets that are doing amazingly well. But this is also my criticism of having lived overseas in a couple of different places and coming back. Australia as a culture is very risk averse, is very innovation averse. They're always wanting to go with what's tried and true. They'll always take the path that it just rattles the cage a lot less. And I remembered back in school when I was a student, year 11, studying Italian, we had an exchange student, and we asked her, what's the first thing that you noticed about our culture? And it was interesting that she said this. She said, you don't really have a strong solidarity. You would not band together to really push through a gate. And she said, because she came from Spain, and she said, if some student got unfairly suspended or expelled, we would make a pact at 1 p.m. the next day to get out, all of us, and walk outside and sit outside the gate until that student got reinstated. She said, I don't feel that or see that in you. And it's a shame, because Australia has such an amazing unionist history. We back at 70, 100 years ago, we in New Zealand were one of the first countries in the world to get the woman the vote. History in warfare unionism was better pay for a lot of professions and trades. But somehow I think in the rise of neoliberalism and how much Australia is starting to identify with the US beast, it's almost to our detriment culturally. I'm feeling the weak spots, despite there being so much good already there. But I guess I like the fire. I'm okay with seeing a bit more fire.
It's a better life when we're fighting. And you're right about the unionism. I mean, aside from women getting the right to vote, the 8 hours of work, rest and play, all that stuff came from here. And you have a look at where we are today, where, Australia's arguably only militant union, and unions are supposed to be militant. They're not supposed to be on the board of super funds, I don't think. They should be in a place where they're protecting members' money. I don't have a problem with that, and I think there is a place for them to do that. But I think there might have been a disconnect between what unions were supposed to do and suddenly being in charge of trillion-dollar funds, and what they should be doing, where, you've got the CFMEU that actually fights for its members. And where we are today, where I don't know, well, we ask, why is union membership so low in so many industries? Because people don't see a perceived value. And that speaks to that Spanish student saying you're not connected. In France, I remember that they raised the age of retirement to 67, and the average age of the protester was like 20. And it was like, I'm protesting at 20 because in 45 years from now, I'm going to have to work an extra 2 years. I mean, that happened here, barely, not a whimper. We don't fight anything.
No, we're all bark and no bite. That's what I found. We like to complain about things, but when push comes to shove, and there's a passivity here, you know, which kind of resonates with the she'll be right kind of attitude. And I think about and that permeates through everything. And with neoliberalism and everyone being hyper individual, that does make us forget that we have our brothers and sisters and we have power there. I taught a careers class, I think 7 years ago, and I was looking at the enterprise agreements, industrial award wages, and I did the maths that with inflation and everything, 20 years before when I was working in retail, I was earning more on a Sunday back then than they would be earning now. And I was trying to explain this to the students. So you're 16 years old. And they looked at me like I was speaking gibberish. They were like, well, what, you know, doesn't matter, miss, who cares? And I'm thinking, wow, there was a real shift in not caring about this kind of stuff. I also feel there's that, you know, Australia's gone from being proud to identify with the battler, the underdog, whereas right now I think in this neoliberal framework, people find it really hard to identify with the underdog because that means that they themselves are of that socio-economic demographic. So I feel like with how media is, with how social media has primed the generation, we've also got these kind of mitigating influences that, you know, and we're not having these conversations about, well, what are all these different influences and how is it impacting in, you know, the social cohesion, the personal development? What's an ability in somebody to be able to walk the straight and narrow and actually not yield to what everybody else is doing and going, you know, let's do this, and what's it going to take for us to actually really band together? I mean, and this is where Palestine has brought people together in Australia. And it's beautiful to see. But I feel after a year, things have been, I mean, some things are gaining traction, but some things are also getting watered down because we're being told to play by the government's rules. And at the end of the day, I really see politicians as they're public servants. You know, they're elected by us, they're public servants, they should be working for us, and they have not been listening to us. And I'm a big believer in Audre Lorde's, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. As long as we play by their game and their parameters, nothing is ever going to change. And Palestinians have been saying that for a really long time. Back in the 40s, they went to the UN. They went through all the correct channels. They've been doing it ad nauseum, and no one listens. You know, when they tell people in the whole world what the Zionist beast is like, they know, they've lived with it up close and personally. Listen to them. So I feel like there's something needs to be redirected to really understanding that at the moment. Like, you know, how can we move outside this imperial framework? We actually need to ordain and arbit the parameters, not our governments anymore, because they've shown us what they are. You're saying fascism is coming. I actually think it's already here.
Yeah, there's no question it's here. No question it's here. Maybe the rest of the world's seen it. I read something, they've gone, you know, Donald Trump's been elected, fascism has started. Like, did you not just see what happened in the Queensland election? Fascism's here.
Exactly. I mean, what have we done? We've reduced the child prison age to 10, which makes up the youngest in the world. I mean, what does that say about Australia?
And 90-something%, even 100% of kids that are 10 that are incarcerated are, of course, our black brothers and sisters.
Exactly. It's a very dark, we're entering a dark age, you know. So I think we just have to accept that. And for me, I had a feeling Trump was going to get in, but when Trump got in the first time, a lot of my American friends were pretty blasé about it. They were like, he's just a symptom of what America, I spell it with a triple K, America, the ghetto, is really like. Like, he's just a symptom of what is, you know, you've got your politicians and you've got the underlying values and attitudes of the people. And that's really what we're dealing with. It's like the study that they did on Scandinavia with gender equality. And even though women get paid and they get positions of seniority in work, what they found beneath it all was there was still more domestic violence in the home sphere because the underlying values and attitudes of men were still not equal. You know, and again, we have to start expanding our political consciousness at the moment. We cannot just talk about Palestine. It is so intersectional. It is, you know, we need to talk about what patriarchy is. And this is what empire seeks to regiment every day, is hierarchy, dominance, extraction, theft, pillaging, all of that. You know, so
exemplified absolutely in Zionism. May it be cursed to damnation and hell.
Yeah.
Maxi, thanks so much for joining us. We wish you all the very best in your journey and everything you're doing. Well done.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Nasser. Much appreciated. Been great.
A pleasure, Maxi, a pleasure. Don't forget to go to Al-Haq, ALHAQ.org. There'll be a link in the podcast. Tell your friends, share the podcast. Remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community radio. To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au.